Majenko. More melting. This is what I used to play a lot of, and then it got canned, and then it came back, and it not only came back as a unofficial game, they managed to get the license. So this is City of Heroes Homecoming, that is now officially licensed to use the City of Heroes IP. Hi Swamp. let's get out the tutorial first. This should allow us to exit the tutorial and actually get to the first game zone. This was added very late in the original game. Unskippable cutscenes. Better turn off high speed run because it'll be a lot easier to You've got to love the physics of it. You've been given a bomb that's food sticks of dynamite taped to a 50-gallon drum, and you stick it in your pocket. Pockets of holding so large, Majenko, that the US might invade for the oil. Well, it's a 50-gallon drum. There's no guarantee there's actually oil in it. Get rid of those because they'll be really annoying soon. Oh, what happened to them? Break or just needed new? Squirrels don't steal glasses. That would be nuts. Is this going to be in the most bizarre way, in the style of, if you're going to screw up in a way that makes everyone ask, how? Okay, yep. I have the similar pain coming, except I first have to go and have an eye test, so they can tell me how bad the cost is going to be for new glasses. Yeah, I have varifocals. Look, Majenko, just because you use upto style glasses, it it is a buff, because in this, when you level up, all your health is restored and your stamina, and you get temporary enhancements of accuracy, damage, and a few others. For some reason, the NPCs are respawning a lot quicker than they should. Right, let's find a hole in the ground. forces. For a mastermind, this gets a lot easier when you've got more than one attacker. There we go. But yeah, you can normally get up to 6. On my other characters, I've got a mastermind with mercenaries, and you get 3 soldiers, 2 special ops, and basically Rambo. And one of the standard soldiers is a medic, so you get healing as well. But you don't get the extra characters until quite a few levels up. Annoyingly, the output on stream is brighter than Oros's internal LCD. So there's some things I can see much clearer, but with a 5-second delay. Well, yeah, the game is going through the Extron. One of the nice things about COH is it's now so old that modern hardware just laughs at its system requirements. To give you an idea, when I first played this as the actual subscription game, I was using a GeForce MX 200. What processors on Woody? The original version would, but not with upgrades to where it is today. I can't remember how long it ran for. I think it was an original game. I think it was getting on for 12 years before Cryptic Studios shut it down. Yeah, the modern game needs much higher requirements, and most of that is simply for DirectX. To give you an idea, when City of Heroes launched, I think I've got the box down here because I have the boxed original release, and I think it originally launched around the '98 era. Let me. No, it launched just after XP, 2004. And it was canned in 2012, so it ran for 8 years, and some of the source code, I'm not going to say leaked, it was reverse engineered and released, and that became an underground system. You could only play it if you knew someone who was on the server who could get you an invite to the private servers that had been built. And the biggest one of those is what was simply known as Homecoming. They didn't put City of Heroes on it, and they got into negotiations with Paradigm Studio and Cryptic Studios, and got the IP. So it's now an official running XP era MMORPG that is back in active development and playing. So you literally download the client, it downloads all the resources, you create an account, and off you go. And people chip in to pay for the hosting. I think the reason, Swarm, that it's a pleasant story is because it ran as the underground system for a couple of years. And I think that convinced Cryptic that when they went into negotiations that they wanted to protect the IP. They didn't want to just exploit it. They were dedicated players who wanted the old game back. And I think that's part of how the negotiations happened, was from that standpoint of, we want to run it. We don't want to, buy it, run it, make a load of money and run off screaming. We want this to run for as long as possible. You do get some lovely stupid touches, like the K6 GPO phone boxes. I never picked up a different MMORPG after this. I put so many hours into it I couldn't face doing that with a new game. Hi, Matt. A lot of these first missions are quite grindy, but it's a lot of it is grindy in exposing the map. Because to give you an idea, this is the zone I'm in. This is the starting zone for villains. But all of these are places you can travel to. On Heroes, it's all different areas of the city, and there's most of the sections are connected by a monorail. Whereas on this, it's islands and ferries. So when you get access to another area, you go to the ferry. It asks literally where do you want to go to, and you're transported to that other area. To give you an idea of how low the actual network requirements are for this game, it works over 33.6. Yeah, the biggest issue in the modem and ISDN days was not playing it, it was downloading the updates. Bye, Majenko. Well, but by the time I was playing this swarm, I had what was it was unlimited access. I didn't pay per minute for the connection, so I just kept the line nailed up. Originally 33.6, then single channel of ISDN. Yeah, BT released this service they called Anytime, except it wasn't. The idea was, if you had an Anytime ISP, you could pay an extra bit of cash and you would get free calls to a specific number in the evenings and weekends. There was a higher tier called Surf Time Anytime, which got you 24/7 access. So as a Demon user, I would pay a fee to Demon, then a fee to BT, and that was it. I could call the 0844 number that the ISP provided whenever I wanted without any call costs, so naturally I just nailed the lineup. Yeah, even today we don't tend to do Ethernet to the home ISP here, mostly because of the routing. My FTTP connection is still PPPoE, so it's GPON to the ONT on the wall behind me, Ethernet to my incoming router, that does the PPPoE, and because I have a routed subnet, that gives me my public IPs, and my actual router is plugged into that. So 4 of the IPs are running on pfSense, and I have a secondary router for untrusted stuff, completely independent, doesn't even share NATing gateway, it has its own live IP. That way, if I get something that could be infected, I've got an entire network I can plug it into, I can give it internet access, and it's on its own IP, its own equipment, its own network. It shouldn't be able to break stuff. It's not to say it won't, but it's as far as I can go without it trying to break stuff. Right, I obviously haven't killed something. I've had the fun of working with both GPON and TPON, and TPON is the most irritating system in the world. There we are. Telephony, yes. TPON is PSTN and ISDN over a passive optical network. And the reason, there were two main places it was used in the UK. The first was in Milton Keynes, which was, and I use the term loosely, a new town. Basically, Milton Keynes is a city, well, technically not a city, because it doesn't meet the UK requirements for a city, but it is a city that is built out of existing villages and towns to make a larger area. And so a lot of the places were wired for TPON. The other place it was used, and which is why I know about it, is at Flixborough. Now, in the late 70s and early 80s, there was a chemical work in Flixborough until the day that there wasn't. And when I say there wasn't, I am not joking. Literally, the plant disappeared one day. The shockwave covered 20 miles and was felt further away. The entire site exploded. And after it was cleaned up, they built the Flixborough Industrial Estate. But there was a copper shortage at the time. So the solution was, rather than run a 500 pair from the local phone exchange, and I use the term loosely, the local phone exchange is in the centre of the next town, not in the village. So from the phone exchange to the new estate is about 6 miles. So I'll leave you to imagine the amount of copper in a 500 pair exchange cable that runs for 6 miles. So what they did was put TPON in. So, but they didn't put it in the way you'd expect. The way it'd been put in Milton Keynes is how it was meant to be done. You run a fibre to a passive optical splitter, and then you run a fibre to every premises that splitter's covering, so let's say 10 premises, and their endpoint is tuned to their frequencies. So let's say you've got 10 houses, you will have 20 frequencies, 10 send receive, and your unit will only listen on your incoming frequency and transmit on its send, hence why it can all be done passively. They didn't do this in Flixborough Estate. What they did was they ran it into a building, put all the equipment there, and then ran copper loops to each building. So if you ordered a PSTN line, you got a copper loop that was maybe 250 metres long, and then 6 miles of fibre. This was fine at the time. Then the internet came along. The system was still in place when ADSL was developed. Now, as you could probably guess, ADSL doesn't work when you've got 6 miles of fibre in your copper loop. Because the way the lines had basically been done was, if you ordered a PSTN circuit, you would come off the MDF in the exchange into the TPON unit, be fired down the fibre to the local TPON endpoint, back onto copper, and then the loop into your building, to your socket. ADSL isn't going to do that. About 10 years ago, they had to start laying new copper to that estate to provide lines. At which point, we've now got VDSL and we could have equipment on the end, but the fibre is the wrong size. You literally can't run GPON over that TPON system because the diameter of the core of the fibre is roughly 50% larger than the fibre we're using today. Oh look, another player. So what happens is that if you were to try and mate it up, you've got a very high chance that the signal will not hit the sensor and therefore won't work. So they've got an ultra modern system that cannot interface with the current incarnation of the technology. So they're having to lay new fibre to replace the old fibre to provide services. What's really annoying, Swarm, and this is probably not going to shock you because it's politics, this basically tells you that we could have had a fibre-based comms network in the UK 30 to 40 years ago. But the government said BT couldn't install it, it wasn't worth the cost. Because let's face it, if we had used TPON in more places, we would have built equipment that could interface to the old fibres. But is it worth doing it when you've only got a couple of sites that do it? And what's really silly about it, from the technology point of view, is it's the same government that made that decision that also introduced the BBC Computer Literacy Project and asked the BBC to train up the next generation in computers. So the same people who limited the future of telecoms for 30 odd years are the same people who backed the BBC Micro. It's one of the bits I love on TV tropes is if you read their page on the Archimedes, it basically describes it as the follow-up after the reasonable success of the BBC Micro. The Archimedes is the follow-up computer from Acorn. It is probably the most important computer series you have never heard of. And as you can imagine, it then goes on to explain why this is so, which is, of course, it's where the ARM comes in. I would love to play this with a friend of mine, but she would never be able to play it because you might have noticed that the bad guys have quite a insectoid feel, and Arachnos's thing is spiders. Brenna is arachnophobic, to the point she can't even mention them. She would not be able to handle this game because of the spider imagery. Yep. And it's very hard to do that when the primary bad guys have spiders as their entire shtick. You can't exactly turn off the spider imagery of these guys. And the problem is, they crop up in the... as they're the bad guys, hence City of Villans, they crop up in the Heroes game as well. Can I use any of those? No, 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 no. Okay, let's sell them. That was an option that took me a long time for them to add. The ability to cancel a stuck mission, something you can't complete, so you would, you know, jump past it, and it took them quite a long time. Who did that select? Oh, over there. About an hour. I'm quite impressed with actually how this is... I shouldn't be, because it's the Extron doing all the work. Because all I've done is tag the second... well, one of the second outputs of this machine into the Extron. And then I've changed the scaling options on the Extron. The reason why I say one of the video outputs is this machine is running the internal screen. It has a mini display port on the side, HDMI on the back, and it can output over USB, Thunderbolt and USB-C. I think this one's Thunderbolt 2. So, for a laptop, not exactly short of video outputs. I need to be up on there. Oh, I have a temporary jetpack. One of the problems in Heroes is you spend a lot of the start of the game trying to find the ability to fly, because you're a superhero, you should be able to fly, right? Oh, there's multiple ways of flying in this, because you have different power sets, like where they come from. So you have science, which is like jetpacks, magic and other things will give you flight, so the maps are designed around it. It just can take you a while to get to the point you have a power that is able to do flight. And there are some bits you definitely need to be able to fly to get to. And otherwise it's just a really quick way to get around the maps, because you don't have buildings in your way. Although in Heroes you have a lot of high-rise buildings and you can end up with buildings in the way, but they're still easier to get around than running around. The only thing they never implemented that I can think of would be a magic carpet, which you think would fit the genre. It'd be really nice to have a GD type character sitting on the magic carpet flying across the level. Some of my original characters are interestingly boring. I had in the original game I had a tank, the original Chloe Red, who was mostly blue. You will notice this, all the names of my characters are Chloe colour, and the colours never match the name, and that is deliberate. Hence why Chloe Pink mostly is black. But she was described as a superhero's librarian. The classic one would be the Weird Al one, Conan the Librarian. What's nice is once you get used to contact, you don't have to actually go back to them. After a certain point you get to phone them, which makes life so much easier. to find the entrance. There it is. The marker not being where the entrance is quite a common issue. The biggest issue when that happens is when the actual entrance is underground and you can't see any of this. Yes, a modification of a compound bow. That well-known up-close weapon. I don't know if they're any more difficult to master than any other bow. I think it's mostly that the way the skill set works with them is different to any other bow. So if you train in one bow, it's even harder to convert over to a compound bow than just learning it from the beginning as the first one. So yeah, there's a lot of skill involved, but the understanding of how to implement it on the bow, as far as I know, is different, and it's different enough that it's not just oh, I know how to use a bow. It's like, no, you need to learn this bow. originally the game didn't have these markers over the NPC heads, which did make life fun. All you got was the ring at the bottom, so you'd often spend a lot of time desperately trying to find who you're meant to talk to, especially if there's quite a few in an area. There are a few bits like this where you have multiple contacts in a row. Some of them are also quite silly. You can sort of see the interests of the original designers, which have been carried over. There's one bit in Heroes where you end up meeting up with a Canadian Mountie who's come to the City of Heroes in regards to the murder of his father, for reasons for which he will not be going into further details, because it's Fraser from Due South. Go around this way. Now the classical game problem. How do we get in? Oh, I could just cheat. Now I have to find someone, and there's no marker map, which probably means they're going to be right at the other end. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Heroes and Villains ticks all the trope boxes. You know, secret underground lairs, high-tech labs, abandoned high-tech labs. You know, given the genre, hit supervillains and superheroes, you can't really do it without hitting every single stereotype and trope going. One of the problems they actually had on launch is copyright. People were trying to create their favourite superheroes in City of Heroes, and of course the copyright holders came down on the actual game studio quite hard. So trying to create a Superman or a Spider-Man will very quickly get your account terminated. You had to think of your own sort of characters, just to protect their backs. Oh, we've upgraded. We have 2 of them now. I think my favourite one like that, Swarm, is the story of the guy that someone's visiting, and she comments about liking his cat, and he says sort of which one, and then goes and pulls out another cat. It turns out he's got 4 almost totally identical cats, and she'd just never seen more than one in a room at once. No, I didn't want to fall down that hole. Oh, it's one of those classic, this has been repeated everywhere type ones. This is also one of a few games I can handle with a third-person view. 6 levels seems to be doing pretty well. It's always very quick at the beginning because the levels are very short to begin with. There you go. 1600 experience. It gets harder as, of course, as you go up the levels. It's not just it needs more actual XP, but you have, if you die, you get debt, so you've got to pay that off before you start earning and stuff like that. But it's always been I always find it a fun game, and like I said, the system requirements are relatively minimum these days, given the spec of machines these days. You know, I could probably run this at full power on one of the laptops that is now deemed obsolete using internal graphics, whereas, you know, I'm running this with a I think this is a mobile 2080. So, you know, for a mobile card for the time, it's no slouch. But I'm going to think about food and trying to work out why my shoulder's hurting so much. So thank you everyone for coming along, and I will see you in everyone else's streams.